The great chamber stretched upward like the inside of a cathedral, but no god was here, only power. Ambassador stood at the center of the floor, a single human woman surrounded by 340 alien species, and she had never felt so small in her life. The seats rose around her in endless circles, climbing toward a ceiling lost in shadow. Beings of every shape filled those seats. Some had scales, some had feathers, some were made of living crystal that caught the light and threw rainbows across the walls. They had been traveling between stars when humans were still learning to make fire. They had built empires when Earth was covered in ice. And now they looked down at with something worse than hatred. They looked at her with pity. The human delegation will speak, announced the High Speaker. His name was, and he towered above everyone else on a platform of white stone. His body was made of crystal, blue and cold, and when he spoke, his voice rang like a bell struck in an empty room. You have been accused of illegal expansion into neutral territory. You have been accused of breaking the Treaty of Boundaries. What do you say? Took a breath. She had practiced this speech 100 times. She knew every word, every pause, every gesture. She had evidence. She had truth on her side. It would not matter, and she knew that too, but she would speak anyway. High Speaker, she began, the 3 moons we colonized were unclaimed. We checked the registry. We followed every protocol. The neutral zone designation expired 40 years ago under Article 7 of the Boundary Accords. We broke no law. She held up a data tablet. The evidence glowed on its screen. I have the records here, the timestamps, the legal filings. Everything is in order. Did not look at the tablet. He did not even glance at it. The council has reviewed your claims, he said. We find them insufficient. Insufficient, felt her voice rise before she could stop it. High Speaker, with respect, you have not reviewed anything. I submitted these documents 3 weeks ago. No one has responded. No one has even acknowledged them. A murmur passed through the chamber, not of support, of annoyance. The alien delegates shifted in their seats and understood that she had made a mistake. She had shown emotion. She had shown that she cared. In this room, caring was weakness. The human speaks out of turn, said a voice from the upper seats. It belonged to a delegate, a creature like a spider made of smoke and red light. This is why they cannot be trusted. They do not know their place. More murmurs, this time agreement. Forced herself to be calm. I apologize for my tone, but I ask only for fairness. Let someone review the evidence. Let someone read what I have submitted. That is all I ask. Finally looked at her. His crystal eyes had no pupils, no warmth, no mercy. The evidence is irrelevant, he said. The council has already voted. The words hit like a physical blow. Already voted, but this hearing just started. The hearing is a formality. The decision was made this morning. Raised one crystal in hand. Earth is hereby banished from the Galactic Council. All human colonies beyond the Sol system will be evacuated within 1 standard year. Human ships are banned from Council space. Trade agreements are terminated. Earth will be quarantined until such time as humanity demonstrates the maturity to rejoin galactic civilization. The chamber erupted, not in protest, in applause. Hundreds of alien voices rose in approval, celebrating the fall of a species that had done nothing wrong except grow too fast, learn too quickly, dream too big. Stood frozen, she had expected to lose. She had not expected this, not the cheering, not the joy on their faces. They were not punishing humanity, they were enjoying it. High above, Admiral watched from the observation gallery. He was 52 years old, with gray at his temples and scars on his hands from wars fought long ago. He commanded Earth's defense fleet, 12 ships that were considered toys by galactic standards. He had come to support Ambassador, to show that Earth stood united. Now he watched her stand alone on that floor, surrounded by creatures who wanted humanity to fail, and something changed inside him, something quiet, something cold. Beside him, Director Bay stood with his hands clasped behind his back. He was 60 years old, the head of Earth's research division, a man who had spent his life studying alien technology and dreaming of the day humanity would be equal to the stars. He had believed in the Council. He had believed in cooperation. He had believed in peace. He did not believe anymore. They planned this, said quietly. From the beginning, the moons were a trap. They wanted an excuse. Nodded, they are afraid of us. They should be. Below finally moved. She walked toward the exit, her footsteps echoing in the sudden silence. The alien delegates watched her go. Not one of them spoke. Not one of them offered a word of comfort or regret. She was nothing to them. Humanity was nothing. At the door, she paused. She turned back to face the chamber one last time. 340 species looked down at her, waiting for her to beg, to cry, to break. She did none of those things. You will remember this day, she said. Her voice was steady, not because of what you did to us, but because of what we will become. Then she walked out, and the door closed behind her. That night in her quarters aboard the transport ship carrying her back to Earth, sat alone in the dark. She thought about her daughter back home, only 7 years old, who had asked her mother to bring back a souvenir from the alien world. She thought about the millions of humans on the colonies who would have to leave their homes, their farms, their futures. She thought about the 60 years of careful diplomacy, all the compromises, all the smiles, all the times humanity had bent its knee to be accepted. None of it mattered, it never had. She opened her communication console and typed a message. It was short, it was encrypted, it went to only 3 people, Admiral, Director Bay, and the President of Earth. The message said, "They have made their choice, now we make ours." Far away in his office on Earth, Director Bay read the message. He read it twice. Then he stood up, walked to his window, and looked up at the stars. 10 years, he said to himself. Give me 10 years. He turned away from the window and began to make calls. The galaxy had cast humanity into darkness. They expected humans to stay there, to accept their fate, to fade into silence and be forgotten. They did not understand what humans did in the dark. They built. 10 years passed, and the galaxy forgot about Earth. The Council's surveillance drones circled the Sol system like patient vultures, watching for any sign of human activity. They saw nothing. The orbital stations that once buzzed with ships now floated dark and empty. The colonies on Mars and Europa sent no signals. Earth itself seemed to have gone quiet, its people presumably broken, learning the humility the Council demanded. On Prime, High Speaker received the annual report on the human quarantine. He barely glanced at it. They have accepted their place, he told his advisors. In another century, they may be ready to try again. His advisors agreed. The human problem was solved. They could not have been more wrong. Beneath the surface of Earth, in caverns that stretched for hundreds of kilometers, humanity was not broken. Humanity was busy. General Park stood on a platform overlooking the largest underground shipyard ever built. She was 38 years old, with sharp eyes and a mind that never stopped calculating. Before the banishment, she had been a theoretical tactician, writing papers that no one read about wars that would never happen. Now she commanded the most ambitious military project in human history. Below her, thousands of workers swarmed over the skeleton of a warship. Sparks flew like fireflies. The sound of hammers and welding torches filled the air. This was Shipyard 7, one of 12 hidden beneath Earth's crust, and the vessel taking shape here was the 47th ship to roll off its assembly lines. Status report, said without looking away from the work. Her aide, a young officer named, checked her tablet. The Resolute will be combat-ready in 6 weeks. That brings our total fleet count to 412 vessels, General. 412. 10 years ago, Earth had 12 ships, small ships, weak ships, ships that alien children laughed at in their educational programs. Allowed herself a small smile, and the Sovereign. Chief Engineer O reports final systems integration is 93% complete. She will be ready for the Admiral's inspection next month. The Sovereign, humanity's flagship, 3 kilometers of metal and fire, bristling with weapons that had no names because no one had ever built anything like them before. Director Base research teams had worked miracles, reverse engineering alien technology, and then improving it in ways the Council had never imagined. The Council used jump gates to travel faster than light, massive structures that took centuries to build, controlled by the elder races, given to younger species as gifts that came with invisible chains. You could only go where the gates led. You could only travel where you were allowed. Humanity had built something different. In a laboratory 3 levels below Shipyard 7, Chief Engineer O stared at a glowing engine core and felt his heart pound with exhaustion and pride. He was 45 years old. He had not slept more than 4 hours a night in 3 years. His wife had left him. His children barely recognized him. He did not care. Nothing mattered except this. The fold drive. It bent space like folding a piece of paper, bringing 2 distant points together. No gates required. No permissions needed. A ship equipped with a fold drive could appear anywhere in the galaxy, instantly, without warning. The Council had tried to develop this technology for 10,000 years. They had failed. They had declared it impossible. Smiled at the glowing core. Impossible, he muttered. They do not know the meaning of the word. He had cracked it in 8 years. 8 years of sleepless nights and failed experiments and moments of despair so deep he had considered walking into an airlock and never coming back. But he had done it, and now every ship in Earth's fleet carried a full drive. The galaxy had no idea what was coming. In another part of the underground complex, Captain Shin climbed out of a flight simulator and pulled off her helmet. Her hair was soaked with sweat, her muscles ached. She had just completed her 4,000th simulated combat mission, and she had won them all. She was 29 years old, one of the best pilots humanity had ever produced, and she had never seen real space. The quarantine meant no human could leave the Sol system, so she trained, every day, every hour she could spare. She flew against simulated alien fighters, memorized their tactics, learned their weaknesses. Beside her, her wingman, Lieutenant Minyu, looked equally exhausted. "Think we will ever actually fly against the real thing?" he asked. Looked at the ceiling, imagining the stars beyond it. "Yes," she said, "soon." She did not know how she knew, she just did. Far above, in a secure command center that officially did not exist, Admiral studied a holographic map of the galaxy. He was 62 now, his hair fully gray, his face lined with the weight of command. For 10 years he had planned this war, every battle, every movement, every contingency. The Council believed they were watching Earth. They were not. They were watching an illusion, carefully maintained decoys and false signals designed to show them exactly what they expected to see: a broken species, a silent world, a problem that had solved itself. Director Bay entered the command center. He was 70 now, walking with a cane, but his eyes were bright with the fire that had driven him for a decade. He moved to stand beside and looked at the map. "The fleet is ready," said. Nodded slowly. "I know. President has approved the timeline. We move in 3 months." 3 months after 10 years of preparation, 10 years of silence, 10 years of waiting. Thought about all the people who had worked themselves to exhaustion to make this moment possible. The engineers, the soldiers, the scientists, the ordinary citizens who had rationed food and resources without complaint because they believed in what humanity was building. "They wanted us to learn humility," said quietly. Smiled. "We learned something else." "What did we learn?" "That we were always underestimating ourselves. We believed them when they said we were primitive. We believed them when they said we were inferior. We spent 60 years trying to earn their approval." The old man's voice hardened. "We will never make that mistake again." Turned from the map, through a window he could see the shipyard below, the Sovereign rising like a sleeping giant waiting to wake. He thought about Ambassador, standing alone in that council chamber 10 years ago, surrounded by enemies who had already decided her fate. She was president now, and soon she would give the order. 3 months, said. "Tell the fleet to be ready." Nodded and turned to leave. At the door he paused. "Admiral, what do you think they will do when they see us coming?" Considered the question. He thought about all the alien species who had laughed at humanity, dismissed them, cast them out like garbage. He thought about the fear that would fill their eyes when 400 human warships appeared from nowhere. "They will finally understand," he said. "They will understand what we become when we have nothing left to lose." The galaxy was about to learn a lesson it would never forget. The message broadcast on every frequency in the galaxy at exactly midnight Council Standard Time. It broke through encryption systems that were supposed to be unbreakable. It appeared on screens in command centers and homes and ships traveling between stars. Every species heard it. Every world received it. President's face filled the screens. She was 51 now, her hair streaked with gray, but her eyes held the same fire they had when she stood alone in that council chamber a decade ago. "To the Galactic Council," she said, 10 years ago you cast us out. You called us primitive. You called us children who needed to learn humility. You expected us to fade into silence and be forgotten." She paused. Around the galaxy, billions of beings watched in confusion. The humans, the quarantined species, how were they broadcasting? "We did not fade," continued. "We prepared. As of this moment, humanity is no longer bound by your laws, your treaties, or your mercy. You taught us that the galaxy respects only strength. We have learned. And now we will teach you what humanity becomes when it has nothing left to lose." The broadcast ended. On Prime, High Speaker watched the message with something he had not felt in centuries: unease. He turned to his military advisor, a general named. "Is this a joke, some kind of human performance?" Before could answer, alarms began screaming. 12 hours after the broadcast, the sky above Prime tore open. 400 human warships appeared from nowhere, not from jump gates, not from any trajectory the defense systems were watching. They simply appeared, as if reality itself had folded to let them through. One moment, the orbital space above the council was empty. The next moment, it was filled with steel and fire. On the bridge of the Sovereign, Admiral watched the tactical display with calm eyes. All ships begin attack pattern Alpha. Focus fire on their orbital defense platforms. Fighter squadrons launch. The defense fleet scrambled to respond. 200 ships, each one 3 times the size of a human vessel, powered up their weapons and moved to intercept. They had never lost a battle in their entire history. They were the elder race, the masters of galactic warfare. They lasted 3 hours. Captain Shin flew her fighter through a storm of plasma fire, her hands moving on the controls with the precision of 10,000 simulations. But this was not a simulation. The explosions were real. The ships dying around her were real. The enemy fighters spinning toward her with weapons charged were real. She felt fear for exactly 2 seconds. Then she felt something else, something she had trained for her entire adult life. She felt ready. Ghost 7 engaging enemy formation, she said into her comm. Then she dove into the heart of the fleet. Her fighter was smaller than anything they had, faster than anything they had faced. She moved through their formations like a blade through water, her weapons finding gaps in their shields that their own engineers did not know existed. Behind her, her squadron followed, 30 pilots who had dreamed of this moment for 10 years. They did not miss. On the ground, civilians looked up at the sky and saw their defense fleet dying. Fire bloomed in orbit like flowers made of destruction. Ships that had protected them broke apart and fell, burning through the atmosphere. General Park led the ground assault personally. Drop pods screamed down from orbit, carrying thousands of human Marines in armor that Council scientists would later call impossible. They landed in the streets of the capital city, moved through the crystalline towers like ghosts, securing government buildings and communication centers with surgical precision. A soldier tried to stop her. He was twice her height, made of living crystal, armed with a weapon that could vaporize steel. Shot him 3 times before he could raise it. He shattered on the ground like glass. Push forward, she ordered her troops. Our objective is the council chamber. They pushed forward. Nothing stopped them. High Speaker watched from his tower as his world collapsed. The defense fleet was gone. The ground forces were being overwhelmed. Human soldiers were climbing through the city like insects, and nothing he did could stop them. How, he whispered, how is this possible? His advisors had no answer. They were running, fleeing, abandoning him to face what was coming alone. The door to his chamber exploded inward. Human soldiers poured through, weapons raised, moving with the coordinated efficiency of predators who knew exactly what they were doing, and behind them walked Admiral. He was not young, he was not physically impressive. He was just a gray-haired man in a simple uniform, walking through the ruins of a civilization that had thought itself untouchable. He stopped in front of and looked up at the crystalline giant. High Speaker, he said, we meet at last. Tried to speak with authority. This is an act of war. The council will respond. You cannot possibly. The council, interrupted, is busy. He was right. Even as he spoke, human fleets were appearing above a dozen council worlds. Prime was not the only target. It was just the most important one. The message was clear. Humanity could strike anywhere, anytime, without warning. No world was safe. Walked past without another word. He walked to the speaker's seat, the elevated platform where had sat when he condemned humanity to exile, the same seat where he had refused to even look at Ambassador's evidence. Sat down. The crystal seat was too large for him. He looked almost absurd in it, a human in a chair built for giants. But no one was laughing, not the captured guards, not the human soldiers, not himself. 10 years ago, said, you told us we needed to learn humility. You told us we were children who did not know their place. You were so certain, so confident, so arrogant. He leaned forward. Do you know your place now? Said nothing. There was nothing to say. In orbit above, Captain Shin flew through the wreckage of the fleet. Destroyed ships tumbled through space, some still burning, some already cold. She had lost count of her kills. It did not matter. What mattered was the mission, and the mission was complete. Ghost 7 to Sovereign, she reported. Orbital space is secured. No enemy ships remaining. Admiral's voice came back, calm and steady. Good work, Captain. Return to carrier for resupply. This is just the beginning. Just the beginning. Looked down at Prime, at the world that had led the vote to banish humanity. Fires burned on its surface. Smoke rose from its cities. The masters of the galaxy were kneeling. She thought about her father, who had worked in a factory building ships he would never see fly. She thought about her mother, who had rationed food for years so the military could have resources. She thought about every human who had sacrificed for this moment. "Worth it," she whispered to herself. It was worth it. She turned her fighter toward the carrier and flew home. The battle was over. The war had just begun. The news of Prime spread across the galaxy like fire through dry grass. For the first time in recorded history, an elder race had fallen, not in some distant skirmish, not in a border dispute. They had been defeated completely, utterly in their own capital, by a species that had been dismissed as primitive children. Panic followed. The collective moved first. They had always considered themselves the true power behind the council, the shadow rulers who let them take the spotlight while they pulled the strings. Now they mobilized everything. 12,000 warships from 17 allied species gathered at the Hollow Nebula, the largest military force ever assembled in galactic history. Their commander, a warlord called, addressed his fleet with absolute confidence. "The humans won a surprise attack against an unprepared enemy. Nothing more. We know they are coming now. We are ready. We outnumber them 30-1. This war ends today." He was wrong about everything except the date. On the bridge of the Sovereign, Admiral studied the intelligence reports and smiled. Not a happy smile. The smile of a man who had spent 10 years preparing for exactly this moment. "They think they outnumber us," he said to General Park, who stood beside him. Nodded. "They count ships. They do not count what is inside those ships. They do not count what we have prepared." "No," agreed, "they do not." 3 levels below the bridge, Dr. No sat in the intelligence center, surrounded by screens showing communications from across the galaxy. She was 35 years old, who had spent 10 years learning every alien language, cracking every encryption system, mapping every political tension in the council. And she had done more than learn. She had planted seeds. The younger species in the council had always resented the elder races. The Yin had ruled for, taking the best worlds, controlling the trade routes, making decisions that affected everyone while only consulting themselves. They called it guidance. The younger species called it tyranny when they thought no one was listening. Had made sure they knew someone was listening. For 10 years, her agents had moved through the galaxy, making contacts, spreading information, reminding the younger species that they did not have to accept their place. That change was possible, that when the moment came, they could choose a different future. The moment had come. "Status report," said to her team. "Confirmed uprisings on 42 worlds," one of her analysts replied. "The supply lines from the outer reach are cut. The communication network is experiencing cascading failures. 6 minor species have declared neutrality and withdrawn their ships from the Alliance fleet." Smiled, the wanted to fight a war. They did not realize the war started 10 years ago. At the Hollow Nebula, Commander watched his perfect plan fall apart. Ships were leaving. Supplies were not arriving. His communications officers reported that half their encrypted channels had been compromised. Somewhere, somehow, the humans had gotten inside his alliance and torn it apart from within. But he still had numbers, he still had firepower, and when the human fleet appeared at the edge of the nebula, he felt his confidence return. 400 ships against his remaining 8,000. Even with their tricks, the humans could not overcome those odds. "All ships advance," he ordered. "Destroy them." Admiral watched the enemy fleet move toward him. 8,000 ships, spreading out in a classic encirclement pattern, trying to surround his smaller force and crush it from all sides. It was the same tactic they had used for 10,000 years. It always worked. It had never been used against humanity before. "They are entering the nebula," reported his tactical officer. Nodded. "Signal the reserve fleets. Time to wake up." The Hollow Nebula was called that because its thick clouds of gas and dust created sensor blind spots, areas where nothing could be detected until you were right on top of it. They knew this. They had used these blind spots many times to ambush enemies. They did not expect to be the ones ambushed. 3 human fleets emerged from the nebula's hidden zones, not 400 ships, 1,200. Every vessel humanity had built over 10 years, gathered here for this single decisive battle. The formation suddenly found itself not surrounding an enemy, but surrounded. "All ships fire," said quietly. The space around the Hollow Nebula turned white with weapons fire. The battle lasted 6 hours. 6 hours of chaos and destruction, ships exploding like stars going supernova, fighters weaving through debris clouds, boarding parties crashing through airlocks to capture enemy vessels. General Park led one of those boarding parties herself, storming the flagship with 200 Marines at her back. Commander met her on his own bridge, surrounded by his elite guard. They were the best warriors the had, veterans of 100 campaigns. Marines killed them in 4 minutes. She walked through the bodies to stand before. He towered above her, a creature of smoke and red light, and even now, even defeated, he looked at her with contempt. "You are insects," he spat. "You will never hold what you have taken. The galaxy will rise against you. You will be crushed." Holstered her weapon. She was not tall. She was not physically powerful. She was just a human woman covered in the blood of her enemies, standing in the heart of a conquered flagship. "You had 10,000 years to build your empire," she said. "We had 10 years. Imagine what we will do with a century." She turned to her Marines. "Secure the ship. The commander will be returned to his to deliver our terms." Was escorted away. He did not struggle. There was no point. His fleet was burning around him. His allies had abandoned him. Everything they had built over was crumbling, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. In the aftermath of the battle, Captain Shin sat in the cockpit of her fighter and stared at the destruction around her. She had killed more enemies today than she could count. She had lost wingmen, friends, people she had trained with for years. Her hands were still shaking. Lieutenant Minu's voice came over the comm. He had survived, barely. His fighter was missing a wing and leaking atmosphere, but he was alive. He said quietly, "We won." She nodded, though he could not see it. "We won." "What happens now?" She thought about it. What happened after you destroyed an empire? What happened after you proved that everything the galaxy believed about you was wrong? "Now," she said, "we build something better." Across the galaxy, the news of the Hollow Nebula spread even faster than the news of Prime. The Great Armada had been shattered. The Alliance was broken. Species that had lived under Elder rule for thousands of years suddenly found themselves free, and they looked toward Earth with something that might have been hope. Admirals stood on the bridge of the Sovereign and watched the enemy ships surrender, one by one. The war was not over. There would be more battles, more negotiations, more difficult decisions, but the hardest part was done. Humanity had proven itself. Now came the real challenge. Now they had to decide what kind of galaxy they wanted to build. "Send a message to President," said. "Tell her we are ready for the next phase." The next phase was not about war. It was about peace. 1 year after the first strike, the war was over. Not because humanity had conquered every world. They could not have, and they did not want to. The galaxy was too vast, too complex, too full of species who had done nothing wrong except follow leaders who made terrible decisions. Humanity had not fought to rule. They had fought to be free. They had fought to be respected. And now, finally, they had achieved both. The Treaty of Sol was signed aboard the Sovereign, in orbit above Earth. Representatives from 300 species gathered in the ship's Great Hall, a chamber that had been designed for exactly this moment. The walls were lined with windows showing the blue curve of Earth below, a reminder of where humanity had come from and what they had endured to reach this day. President stood at the center of the chamber, dressed in simple white, her gray hair pulled back from a face that carried every year of struggle and sacrifice. She had been an ambassador once, silenced and dismissed. Now she spoke, and the entire galaxy listened. "We did not seek this war," she said. "We wanted only to grow, to learn, to take our place among the stars as equals. When you cast us out, we could have faded. We could have accepted our fate. We chose differently." She paused, looking around the room at the faces of creatures who had once mocked humanity, feared humanity, tried to destroy humanity. Many of them could not meet her eyes. "We chose to become strong. We chose to fight, and we won." Her voice hardened. "But winning a war is not the same as building a future. Strength alone is not enough. If we become what you were, if we rule through fear and arrogance as you did, then we have learned nothing, and everything we sacrificed will have been for nothing." She raised a document, its pages glowing with the text of the treaty. "This treaty dissolves the old council. No more elder races. No more junior members. No more species told they must wait their turn to matter. The new Galactic Assembly will give every world an equal voice. Every species will have a vote. Decisions will be made together, or they will not be made at all." A murmur passed through the chamber. This was more than anyone had expected. The humans had won. They could have demanded anything. They could have taken the council's place as rulers of the galaxy. Instead, they were offering something different. They were offering equalities. High Speaker stepped forward. He moved slowly now, his crystalline body cracked and dim from the year of captivity, but he was still the leader of his people. He had been brought here to sign the treaty, to formally acknowledge the end of dominance. For a long moment he stared at. She had stood before him once, pleading for fairness, and he had not even let her finish speaking. He had been so certain of his superiority, so confident in the natural order of things. "President," he said, his voice no longer ringing like a bell, but quiet and broken. "Why, you could crush us. You could make us suffer as we made you suffer. Why this mercy?" Considered the question. Behind her, Admiral stood with his hands clasped, watching. General Park waited nearby, her uniform still carrying the dust of a dozen battlefields. Dr. No sat at a console, monitoring communications, making sure this moment was broadcast to every corner of the galaxy. "Because mercy is not weakness," said finally. "It is the greatest strength of all. Any species can destroy. Building something better, something that lasts, that is what separates civilization from chaos. We will not repeat your mistakes, High Speaker. We will be better." Bowed his head, slowly, painfully, he moved to the table and pressed his crystalline hand to the treaty, leaving his mark. One by one, the other representatives followed. Commanders who had sworn to destroy humanity, admirals who had laughed at human ships, species who had cheered when Earth was cast out. They all signed. When it was done, permitted herself a small smile. The Galactic Assembly will hold its first session in 6 months on neutral ground. Until then, peace is declared. Ships may travel freely. Trade may resume. The quarantine of Earth is lifted. The chamber erupted in applause, but it was different from the applause 10 years ago when humanity was banished. This time, the sound held hope. Months later, Admiral retired. He had led humanity through its greatest triumph, but he was tired. He had seen too much death, made too many impossible choices, carried too much weight on his shoulders. He returned to Earth, to a small house on island, where the ocean met the sky and the stars were bright at night. He planted a garden. Vegetables mostly, and some flowers his wife had loved before she passed. He worked the soil with his hands and tried not to think about all the lives he had taken to reach this peace. One evening, President came to visit him. She walked through his garden, admiring the tomatoes, and sat with him on his small porch as the sun went down. The Assembly's first session was a success, she told him. They have chosen General Park as their first rotating chair, a human leading the galaxy. Who would have imagined it? Smiled, will do well. She was always better with people than she let on. And Captain Shin has been promoted to Admiral. She is commanding the peacekeeping fleet now. Good, she has earned it. They sat in silence for a while, watching the stars appear one by one. Finally, spoke again. Do you regret it, any of it? Thought about the question. He thought about the battles, the deaths, the moments of terrible violence. He thought about enemies he had destroyed and allies he had lost. He thought about the cost of everything they had built. I regret that it was necessary, he said quietly. I regret that they gave us no choice, but regret what we achieved? No, never. Nodded, she understood. They had both paid prices that could never be repaid, but they had also given humanity something priceless, a future, a place among the stars, a chance to show the galaxy what they could become. What will you do now? She asked. Looked at his garden, at the small green things growing in the soil, at the life he was nurturing after so much death. Grow tomatoes, he said. Watch the stars, remember. On 100 worlds across the galaxy, the story was already being told. In alien schools, children learned about the species from Earth that had been cast into darkness and rose burning bright. In academic halls, scholars debated how humanity had achieved the impossible. In military academies, officers studied the campaigns of Park and the tactics of Admiral Shin. And everywhere the same question was asked. How did they do it? How did a species so young, so small, so dismissed by everyone who met them, manage to change everything? The answers varied. Some said it was luck, some said it was technology, some said it was the fold drive or the weapons or the secret fleets hidden beneath Earth's surface. But those who really understood, those who had watched humanity rise, knew the truth. It was none of those things. It was something far simpler and far more dangerous. Humanity had been pushed into a corner. They had been told they were nothing, that they would never amount to anything, that they should accept their place and be grateful for it. And they had refused. They had looked at the galaxy that rejected them and said, "We will prove you wrong. We will work harder than you ever imagined. We will sacrifice more than you thought possible. And when we return, you will never dismiss us again." That was the lesson the galaxy learned. That was the story that spread across the stars. Do not push humanity into a corner. Because when humans have nothing left to lose, when they are fighting for survival, when they have been told they cannot win, they become something the universe has never seen before. They become unstoppable. And now, with the old order broken and a new one rising, humanity looked to the future, not as conquerors, not as rulers, but as builders, as partners, as the species that had proven anything was possible if you were willing to fight for it. The galaxy had finally learned to respect them. And humanity was just getting started.